the secret is not in today's workout data. It's in all the collected data together. So we were the very first in 2000 to launch an application where you could actually analyze heart rate, power, and we actually showed it to the hardware manufacturers and they thought it was useless. And then about 2005, we got our very first Tour de France cycling team. We had every single Tour de France cycling team last year on TrainingPeaks.
Do you have some predictions into what's gonna pick up in the future?
Lately, I'd say the last 5 years, we've seen now a lot more growth in running, but in particular,
Welcome to the Lubo Smid podcast. Today, I'm happy to introduce Dirk Friel, co-founder and Chief Evangelist of TrainingPeaks, and also a former professional cyclist. TrainingPeaks is a platform used by professional athletes and coaches to optimize their training. And they have been at it since 1999. So you can imagine how many rounds of different kinds of innovations they have gone through. So it was a very inspiring discussion with Dirk to go through finding the motivation to keep pushing for building the best product for athletes and their coaches. So let's get to it. And we are rolling. We have started the conversation right away with some interesting insights into high altitude training and how it helps athletes to be better. And as we have you, Dirk, today to talk about all things TrainingPeaks, I think it's very well fitting with me being in Mexico City right now.
yeah, absolutely. Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast. Yeah, really interesting. It's always fun being your own kind of test case, and science experiment. So that's what you're going through right now, going to altitude, especially if you're not used to it. So yeah, it sounds like you felt the effects acutely the first week already.
It was intense. I as I mentioned, like I could barely run. I wouldn't even consider it a run. What I'm used to, just walking around the city, I could feel how heavy I was breathing. But it's been a little over a week, 10 days ish now.
Yeah.
And it's it's a totally different game now.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to altitude for the benefits, you need to be there a long time. You need to be there at least 3 weeks is kind of what I've read. So sounds like you're going to be there a while and take advantage. The other, I think things that, athletes get wrong is they go to altitude and they do too much too early. And you have to take that first week to really acclimatize and drop the volume 25%, only zone 1, zone 2, which is hard to do for the first week. And then you can ease into it after that. So most people just go to altitude and they overdo it and they come out
crash it hard.
Yeah, they come out worse and they don't really get any benefits. So yeah, it's fun to experiment and see if it can help you later on.
Have you heard of any downsides of doing that? That someone like just went all out and it totally like crushed them?
I don't have firsthand experience per se of coaching athletes that have done that, but there's definitely many examples of where that's happened, where athletes got zero benefit from in large part because they went too hard at altitude. And so you have to adjust all your training zones. Again, before you go, you have to rest. You have to show up rested. You have to then rest when you get there. It takes time, and if you go too much too early, it's all downhill from there and there's no benefits. So yeah, it's really good to have that coach that overseeing things that has that experience to help the athlete adjust and, take advantage of the time wisely.
So you sit on a very interesting intersection of fitness, sports, and technology. Because back in 1999, what an interesting year, you founded TrainingPeaks, which today I consider as the premier platform that pro athletes use to connect with their coaches and trainers. But I would love to go all the way back and find out what was the inception like? Because I know that the state of technology back then was a lot different.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the story was I was a professional cyclist. I was pro for about 12 years. I retired in 2002. But in the mid 90s, I started coaching with my father. He had already been an endurance coach, primarily cycling, running, and triathletes is who he worked with. And as I started to coach with him, unfortunately, back then we were using the fax machine and email attachments, to send training logs, to receive training logs, to send the programming. And then we were getting email attachments of heart rate and power files. All kinds of different files were being attached, to a single email. You had a Polar device, which was, I think it was .hrm was Polar, and PowerTap was a new power meter, and that was a .csv file. Some people had SRMs, and that was a .srm file. And so every single device had a different file format, and therefore a different software application that you had to open on your desktop. So if you're working with 5 different athletes, you might have 5 different software applications open just to analyze heart rate, right? Let alone then you're creating a spreadsheet or a fax or something to deliver next week's programming and training logs. So it was data fragmentation everywhere, and you couldn't consolidate it all and make nice, pretty charts, et cetera, et cetera. So, this was the late 90s, and the internet was picking up. So I was like, hey, Dad, we should really consolidate, create a web-based platform of some kind, which has a calendar and a training log. And imagine if it could be compatible with every single device the athlete used. That was just like a crazy dream. But I knew, like, obviously technology was coming along and that was potentially feasible. At that time, you could not analyze a heart rate file through a web browser. There was no website where you could do that. So we were the very first in 2000 to launch an application where you could actually analyze heart rate, power, time, distance data within a web browser. I mean, that didn't exist anywhere. And we actually showed it to the hardware manufacturers, and they thought it was useless. They literally, we had hardware manufacturers tell us that nobody looks at their data after they train. Like, they saw no value in it at all. Whereas today, obviously, we're all looking at our data, we're all looking at our sleep, we're all looking at HRV, run, graph, everything. Like, we love looking at data after we do it. But literally, that just flew over the heads of even the
It is
device
a
manufacturers.
complete paradigm shift
Yeah,
to what you are describing, because today I think that we only see how valuable the data are, that you can take them, you can make learnings out of them, and you can make meaningful changes to either your workout routines or just your daily habits. And like you can see noticeable differences.
yeah, exactly. And I think too many people back then and even today are too fixated on today's data, and the true value is in the data over time and the holistic view of the data and the trends that the data creates. And you really need that consistency of training, consistency of rest, periodization. And so if you have to have a 10,000-foot view over the data to get the most out of it. The secret is not in today's workout data. It's in all the collected data together. There's no one secret workout. The secret is in the synchronization of those workouts for the individual. And that was another thing that the device manufacturers didn't get back then. They just thought it was all about in the moment, like the data you have right now in the moment. And past that, it was useless, which is actually the opposite. The more value comes from looking at the data trends over time rather than just today's data. So that's always from the beginning with TrainingPeaks. It's always been about that holistic view, but also not just the device data. I I put more emphasis on the subjective feedback from the athlete more so than the objective data. That feel of the interpretation of how the workout felt means so much, and that's a big piece of the information, feedback loop to the coach, which helps them adjust things and prepare for tomorrow's workout. So it isn't just about what we see, the X's and O's or the data itself, but the subjective feedback has so much to do with excellence, performance.
And like as you were navigating the journey, what would you say were the most notable features that you have managed to roll onto the platform that really picked up and that helped you to spread the word about TrainingPeaks?
Well, I guess number one kind of relates back to what I just said. We are compatible with everything now. That was a big deal. We were the first to be compatible with pretty much anything on the market. So I think the beauty of that is we can grow with the athlete. Athletes go from one season to the next. The older I get, the more sports I do actually. you know, I I I
That's a
ski
good
race. I
thing.
do I do ski mountaineering, in short we call it skimo, but I do 5 months of skimo racing during the winter. Um, that's primarily heart rate, GPS kind of data that I'm looking at. But then I do another 7 months of the year of cycling and mountain bike and gravel. And so I have power data and heart rate data. But yet, TrainingPeaks can grow and expand with me with my different goals. And now that we've been doing it for 25 years, we've actually seen athletes that have started as juniors. They became, U23 athletes. They became professional. They retired. Now they're coaches. They went from being a cyclist to a runner. They now do marathons, but they coach cyclists. So it's kind of like, again, it's nice that this one app can kind of like adjust and grow with you. So I guess that's the number one first thing in terms of technology and features that we've come out with, that have made an impact. After that is I've said before, we look at data in a holistic view. So we came up with the performance management chart for cyclists with power. It's really powerful. You can look at your chronic training load, kind of being a proxy for fitness, your acute training load, which is again a proxy for your fatigue, and then kind of the difference between the two is a training stress balance. So your form, and so there's no one secret pattern for all athletes. There is a unique pattern for every unique individual. So once you get a year's worth of data collected and you look at the performance management chart and you can overlay, where did you go really well? Where did you have your peak performances? Where did you maybe get sick or injured? And so we try and replicate what worked, stay away from too much training or whatever went into the, getting sick or overtrained. So I think it's just again looking at the data over time has been again kind of like a unique position that we're in the world. So yeah, I guess some unique metrics along with that too. Normalized power, we pioneered training stress score, and some other metrics along the way.
And you mentioned that the sources are extremely important for you, that people can basically upload their data from anywhere. But how do you look at like different metrics, different types of measurement that are, becoming more and more popular, right? Back in the day, it was probably like the heart rate was the most important. We see power meters everywhere today. We
Yeah.
see HRV being popularized a lot, and there is a lot of metrics that are suddenly being more accessible, and their measurements as well, right? People tend to track blood glucose levels, and there is a lot more that we will be able to get later down the road quite easily. So how do you balance between the sources, but also like what are the interesting, important metrics that you want
Yeah.
to have the experience be based around?
Yeah, I think science is ever evolving and it will never stop evolving. So therefore, there's always going to be new metrics or new ways of looking at data. So I think a lot of that it's continually being like analyzed, and you have to determine what's the most important data to look at right now within your training phase. So not all data is equal, right? So we're still learning about, blood oxygen saturation devices, and blood glucose monitoring. There's so many things that affect, that data. But at the end of the day, I'm going to trust my power meter. My power meter is the workload that I performed, so that I'm going to put a lot of value on that, and I may put lesser value on some new metric that I'm exploring or some new hardware device that I'm exploring. But we don't want to ever prevent that evolution of science. But I guess we're not trying to say this is good and that is bad. We try and be compatible with as much as we can, and let the coaches and scientists determine what is effective and at what points to leverage that data. So yeah, it's always interesting to see what's coming out, and now the core body temperature. Now the device called Core, we're compatible with that, and it's really cool to see this in use at the elite level and the professional levels. I think there's a lot of things we still have to learn about core temperature and how to leverage it within training. You can actually have a temperature zone. So there's a lot of really cool cutting edge stuff happening that hopefully more of the education will come out in articles and research so that more everyday athletes can take advantage of it.
How do you go about the future product roadmap as you have
Mm,
been building it for
yeah.
25 years and counting? And I
Yeah.
assume that you get a lot of feedback, you get a lot of insight into how athletes and coaches use the platform, and you want to ever keep it evolving. So, how do you, what are some of the practices that you have instilled in terms of driving the product development properly?
Yeah, definitely number one is listening to the customer. So it can be from many different sides, right? So it's prioritizing that feedback when you see trends coming in from the voice of customer. Then that really starts to filter into the roadmap. For example, we just recently released our strength training capability. So you can track set rep weight. The coach can plan and the athlete can record. And we have videos that go along with it. A video library of over 1,000 strength exercises. But coaches wanted to upload their own video. Like we had our library of 1,000, but there's 5 different ways to do a lunge, and so, or more, 50 different ways to do a lunge. Plus the coach wants to be the star. They want to be the hero. They want to be in the video. They want their logo. So then we quickly adapted and we allowed the coach to upload their own videos now into their TrainingPeaks coach account, which then they, prescribe down to their athlete. So again, that was a voice of customer, but we also looked at the data. We saw 80% of all of our endurance coaches were prescribing strength training, but we had a very horrible user experience for the athlete. So again, we want to try and make the coach the hero and look good and deliver a better quality service to their athletes. So we saw that as a void. So we filled it with a new strength training feature, which is not done. We're still getting a lot of user voice and voice of customer from it feedback, and it's still evolving. And we just recently last week we released TrainingPeaks Virtual, which is an indoor cycling app. And the reason we did that is because it was very, very difficult for a coach to onboard athletes to their indoor winter training programs. There's any number of third-party apps to run these programs through. The athlete would have to get another subscription, another sign up, another login, etc. So we released our own. It's called TrainingPeaks Virtual. And the number one reason we did that was to solve the need of the coach, so they can deliver more services, more easily and have a better user experience down to their athlete base. So yeah, we're looking forward to that, and that's just it's in its beginning. I mean, it just launched. Now it's in the hands of the coaches, and we're getting tons of feedback, and that's going to evolve with their feedback. So I'd say to answer your question, number one, it's based upon feedback from users, but oftentimes we do look in the data itself, and we may not always be asked to build a particular feature, for example, but the data is showing us like there's a void with strength, for example. There's a better way of doing things. So yeah, it still feels like a startup. We're 25 years into it, as you said. It's still exciting. I still feel those vibes of startup because there's so much to do. I mean, my vision is always 5 years out. It's like never fulfilled, right? So that's a frustrating part for any entrepreneur. They're always looking, years out and trying to fill that gap and that roadmap. But it's also the fun part, and also it's awesome when the team comes up with great solutions that I never thought of. It's just blows me away. Like awesome how our team can get together and whiteboard ideas in the office and come up with ideas I never would have thought of, like to solve the same problem. So yeah, it's ever evolving and really, really fun.
Have you noticed any significant trends how the platform is used over the span of 25 years in terms of
Yeah.
what types of sports
Mm.
are on the rise and maybe what types of sports are on decline?
Yeah. Good point. I guess we started the first few years, it was really funded by triathletes because triathletes just they had no tradition. There's no tradition in triathlon. Back in 1999, it was just go get the latest technology, go get the latest bike, go get a coach. A triathlete was 10 times more likely to hire a coach than a cyclist. Then they would get on TrainingPeaks and they would buy a power meter. And so they just didn't have the long, traditional kind of ways of training. So we kind of started, if you will, on the backs of triathlon and the growth of triathlon. And then about 2005, we got our very first Tour de France cycling team. And that kind of started to spread, from the top down in terms of cycling. We had every single Tour de France cycling team last year on TrainingPeaks. So it's definitely like we've got a really big foothold, within cycling. So that kind of grew. And then lately, I'd say the last 5 years, we've seen now a lot more growth in running, but in particular, ultra running. An ultra trail runner is kind of different than a marathoner in terms of their buying habits, and the culture is quite a bit different. We find that ultra runners are much more likely to hire a coach than a road runner or a marathoner. Ultra runners look at data more than road runners. They look at GPS data. They want to know their total altitude gain. They want to know percentage of grade. When should I use my poles? When should I not use my poles? When should I walk versus jog? Plus you have all the nutrition side of things. How do you complete 100-mile or a 200-mile ultra trail race? Now you have to think about all the nutrition. So we have seen growth in running again in the last 5 years, but primarily on the ultra running side of things. So that's been really exciting. And then we have a whole nother space, which is kind of like this hybrid athlete or other sports, and High Rocks is,
Now you are speaking my language.
yeah, exactly. This is kind of how we met, but like High Rocks is definitely growing we have coaches on Training Peaks that only coach high rocks athletes. And now that we have strength, it makes sense. It really is like, oh, high rocks is number one, an endurance event. Like you have to have the endurance first. Then you know that you layer in on that all that strength, right? And how do you recover within the event? That comes down to endurance. And so there's heart rate zones, obviously all the strength training of all the 8 different stations you have to do, um, and then we have the America's Cup, like American Magic, the UK team. We have several of the yachts in the America's Cup, and kind of like other sports that you wouldn't really traditionally think of, like equestrian. There's endurance equestrian events where we have coaches on Training Peaks. So it's very, very diverse. But I'd say that's probably about 10 or 15% of our customer base are like the hybrid sports.
Well, there are some, definitely. There are some. I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
that for the fact.
absolutely. Well, hey, hopefully they continue to grow. I love how we can kind of adapt and are attractive to these new sports. It's really cool.
Do you have some predictions into what's gonna pick up in the future, and are trying to
Mm.
influence it somehow in terms of your marketing activities, where you would like to be growing more in terms of the user base of Training Peaks?
I don't know. I think we'll chase opportunities. If there's opportunities to team up with certain, a lot of ways that we grew Training Peaks was in partnership with national governing bodies, like USA Cycling, USA Triathlon, Cycling Australia, Britain, etc. Maybe 40 different national governing bodies that we're a partner with. We really like that because the national governing bodies educate the coaches, and that's where we want to be. Where do coaches congregate? That's where we want to be. So if some of these evolving sports, grow somehow national federations or they become an Olympic movement, that starts to coalesce the coaches, and then coaches need education. And so I think we tend to follow as well as help promote those organizations, is one of our tenets of how we go about attacking the market. So I hope High Rocks, et cetera, develop more of that education side of things for coaches, and then we want to be right there with them.
I think it's actually happening, and I have seen a lot of movement on that front, and
Yeah,
them building their own certification and
yeah,
investing a lot into like just fueling the future growth of the sport. Because
yeah,
I think like it's nice that people gather and compete, but if you want to do it in a bit more structured manner that will be sustainable, you also have to work with the grassroots, with the people that want to get into the sport, and how do you coach them and how do you work with them. So I think that's all coming.
yeah. I mean, we're an expert instruction based company. We see the world through the eyes of the coach. So I absolutely agree. Um, any sport that has really evolved kind of in a manner with which lays a good foundation for future growth has to incorporate the coach. So some sports are more advanced than others in terms of, I guess, with education of coaching. So yeah, that's really where we want to have our part, where we can have our part to play. So I hope that does evolve more within High Rocks. We're definitely following that.
It seems like you have traded the insane growth that will be really fast for having a steady growth and doing it for the long run, and probably an investment side is connected to it. What's your take on the pros and cons of building something big real quick,
Yeah,
selling it, or basically keep on doing something for 25 years plus, which
yeah.
seems to be the passion of yours.
Exactly. We're not traditional, but we are traditional. The traditional way decades ago of building a business was sweat equity and bootstrap. You know, when a dollar came in the year 2000, our philosophy, which we still do today, is we reinvest 80 cents and we keep 20 cents for ourselves. And that's so I can say we've been profitable every single year from inception. That was built on our sweat equity and bootstrapping. Luckily, it's evolved past sweat equity, and it's actually pays more than the bills, which is good, and it's profitable. Um, but I did not start the business in the traditional sense of starting a business. I had a need as a coach. I needed to fill that need, and I went out and figured out how to build that tool. Lo and behold, somehow it became a business on its own outside of my coaching business. And we realized that probably 12 months in, we're like, wait, we're making money and it's not off of coaching. So we, split the books, created a separate business. We had one business that had coaching revenue and one business that was software. So I did not intend to build a software business, but luckily it evolved that way. And I early on decided to coach less and to focus on TrainingPeaks more, which is all I do now. I don't coach anymore. I just, work on TrainingPeaks, but I see myself as coaching coaches. I need to help coaches build their businesses. Um, so we certainly did give up fast growth, but in a way we were kind of ahead of our time. Like it would have been wasted money. And I think that happens with some businesses where they get too much money too early and they're kind of like the market's not ready yet. And they just end up wasting the money chasing the revenue, but it never really happens because they're kind of too early. They just need to let it grow a little bit more organically on its own. And then where they see, sparks, they can then throw fuel on the fire instead of trying to create the spark in the first place. Right. So I guess my fundamental, values have to do more with what do I want to do with my life? And it isn't about quick wins. It's never been about quick wins. It's the hard yard, if you will. Um, so yeah, I was like, let's build a business that's self-sustaining. I mean, we raised $2 million 17 years ago. Like, you know what I mean? So
It's like
we
a
make
drop in a bucket in today's terms, right?
Yeah. So within TrainingPeaks and whatever our recent, acquisition, that's based off of just profit, building up in the bank for future acquisitions, and we're self-funded. But we do give up immediate, faster growth rates. But also we don't go after the consumer per se. We're happy to take an athlete just signs up directly on our website and starts using TrainingPeaks without a coach, but we'd rather you work with a coach. So yeah, we try to really again, as I've been saying, cater to the coach and build that business. That B2B2C type business is really what we're about. We have the same thing in Train Heroic, which is another company of ours, which is just strength training. They don't have any endurance component at all. It's just strength training. And, again, that's now profitable. And, so it's built in the same, manner with the same values for long-term sustainable growth.
Do you personally miss the coaching side of things that you had to give up to solely focus on TrainingPeaks?
I definitely do sometimes, but I also realize the amount of commitment that takes. If you take on one athlete, just if you coach one athlete, like, you know, we say premium one-on-one, type of client, it's a commitment. It's 7 days a week. I have a coach and I bug him 7 days a week, right? So I know the commitment level it takes for really good quality, high level coaching. But I do miss I hate to say it, but it is a science experiment. Each individual athlete is a science experiment, and that's really fun to go into it with your hypothesis of how and what might work with this athlete, and then you adopt along the way. And every single day is adapting. Every single day, you project what you hope will happen with the science background, but then you have to adapt it to the individual needs of the person, and it has to fit in their lifestyle. So you might have two athletes that have the same basic, parameters, but you can coach them completely opposite for the very same event. And once you're a coach that comprehends that, then you can really make some big changes in people's lives. So I miss that relationship sometimes as a coach.
But have it the other way, and
Yeah.
seems like you still want to get the experiences, what it's like to be a user of your platform. What does
Yeah,
your
and
training
and my wife
regimen
doesn't
look
get
like
it.
these
My
days?
wife doesn't get it. Like I finished today's workout, she has no idea how to give me feedback, right? But my coach can give me the right feedback at the right time, and it's very motivating to get that on a daily basis. Once you experience it, it's tough to not have it.
And
Just like a
like,
life coach or a career coach or your therapist. Like there just are deep relationships that you can build, that can help you as an individual, realize some big dream, right? So it goes well beyond the data and the Training Peaks app. It's that relationship that means so much.
do you personally go and apply it in other aspects of your life, as you mentioned, like having other different coaches, not just for fitness?
I've definitely had a career coach. We had that at Training Peaks, where the executive team, we paid for executive coaching. So that was really, really great to experience that. I tried learning the bass, like the music, playing the bass. So I definitely had an instructor there. And then in strength training, like I just can't get myself motivated to go to the gym and lift on my own. Like I have to be with a group. So every Wednesday at 5 p.m., I go to my strength training group, and there's like three coaches, overseeing the group. So I just need that expert, instruction and accountability, or I just won't get it done. So absolutely, I I see it in different areas.
I feel like for me it's like a roller coaster ride that at the one point I realized that I have a coach for seven different I like in seven different areas I have a coach for something, right? And then I'm like, I should probably tone it down a little. So but it's like ever evolving process where I think it's extremely important that we tap into the expertise that we don't have. And also, and I think that's yet another element that you were kind of hinting, that sense of you getting feedback and being accountable, that you fulfill what you are supposed to, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need to kind of assess where you want to be in a year and what you want to accomplish along the way, and then where do you need help. And another great value I've seen in coaching is they can bring you a lot of shortcuts. You can just pound your away doing the absolute wrong thing every single day, and you might make a little improvement, but one little thing that a coach can bring to you that in that one moment can be 5 times more valuable than you hacking away at it yourself. You know what I mean? There's just certain things that experts see that you can't see yourself, that when they apply that to you, the individual, makes enormous benefit. So I've seen that too many times to know, like, wow, there's a lot of great value there that I just don't know where it's at yet, but I know it's going to come.
That's what I wanted to ask, if you have noticed over the years some best practices, how to actually
Mm.
get the most value out of coaching.
Whew. Well, I think you need to believe in the coach. You have to trust them. If you don't have that, then it's probably not worth continuing because you do have to kind of give up the reins as an athlete and give it to the coach and believe in their direction. I think not enough athletes give enough subjective feedback back to the coach. And I'm really kind of explaining top tier premium level coaching here. There's a spectrum of coaching services. On one end, coaching could be getting the work out of the day and performing it on your own, and the coach never sees anything. It's just one directional. That is a coaching service. But then on the other end is what I'm talking about, which is the premium level, one-on-one, individualized coaching, where it's always a complete feedback loop. They're giving me the workout of the day, and they are seeing the data, they're seeing my comments, and they're adapting tomorrow's workout. So in that relationship, I don't think enough athletes give enough subjective feedback back to the coach. Which can be a lot of value. I've coached athletes and I would hardly ever get any feedback from them. And that was very difficult as a coach to try and prescribe the right workout or adapt to them if I didn't have that subjective feedback.
Right? How can you figure out what's working and what doesn't if you don't hear back?
Yeah, or like how much stress is going on in their life. And today's workout felt horrible. The very same workout was amazing last week, but it felt horrible this week because of the additional stress in the athlete's life and work stress or family stress, whatever it might be. That has to be accounted for. It's not, humans aren't robots. They have the emotions and all the additional stressors in life, as well as nutrition, sleep, quality of. So it's very dynamic decision making to get the most out of an athlete and have them reach their potential.
Do you think that the standard mantra should be that you basically go day by day? Because what I have experienced that some coaches go week by week. They let you basically go through the entire week before they kind of look at it and give you some feedback. So it feels like your position on that is fairly clear.
I think I can go either way. I think if you are very confident in how this athlete will respond to this week's workouts, that's totally fine. I think maybe the farther away you are from competition, that's fine. I think the closer you get to competition, the closer you get to a peak, the more communication needs to come into play, and the more small changes matter. And so it's all about that confidence level and maybe how far away the competition is kind of how I see it.
And have you played with basically the compliance portion of the training a little bit within TrainingPeaks as a product? Because I think it can vary from one athlete to another how diligent they are with complying whatever the coach suggests.
Right. Our compliance right now is very elementary level. It has to do with time or distance. So I think that could be fine tuned more. It's plus minus. If you're within plus minus 10% of the planned workout, you'll get green. If you're 10 to 15% off, it's yellow. If you're above that, it's red, So I don't know if that's specifically the feature you're talking about, but we do have compliance ratings of workouts, and green, yellow, red. But I think there's other ways to make that a better, more fine-tuned to the individual.
I'm very familiar with the feature. I was more asking for what is from your coaching experience. What is your best approach to making sure that the compliance is as high as possible?
Right.
In the end,
Yeah.
it's not about the compliance; it's the outcome that you are training for.
It's funny because I also need to tell the athlete the red is just fine, because I think you need to educate the athlete to make decisions on their own. If you planned a particular workout for today, they wake up, they had horrible sleep, a lot of stress, they start their first effort and it's completely off. I should have given them the confidence to say, to call it quits and to just go home, end of the workout, take it easy, but it's okay to have red, right? So I don't want there to be all this stress wrapped up around always having green. I think it's a so I think overall though, it'd be nice to have 80% of workout, 80 plus percent of workouts be green. Um, but also it's okay to have red and give the confidence to the athlete to make that decision in the moment.
So it's not so strict that you would basically push the
Right.
athletes to
No,
complete everything
no,
always
no,
under
that
all
adds a lot of,
circumstances.
it depends on the personality. Some personalities will do that on their own. They need no additional motivation to do to the second what was planned. But then other athletes, if you press that mentality on them, that just adds a whole other stress level to them. Like, oh my God, there was a red light. I couldn't finish my 5 minute effort because I hit a red light. I'm so sorry. Like, no, no, it's okay. You know what I mean? So again, every individual is different. Some athletes will do it to the T, and others you just don't want to add too much pressure. You got
And
to
it
find
goes
out
both
those
ways, right?
communications. Yeah,
It goes both ways because maybe you did not do enough, but maybe also you did too much, right? So if someone adds extra load, it also is not gonna be 100% compliant.
exactly. Yeah, I think that's a good fundamental thing to think about is I tend to like to prescribe or tell the athlete, finish knowing you could have done one more. Like I'd rather, I guess, optimize than maximize. I don't know which, if that's saying it correctly, but meaning I'd rather add more time, add an intensity than add more intensity. So if this week was 4 times 8 minutes, I'd rather, progressively get to 5 times 8 and 5 times 8 at the very same power, rather than every single week do 4 times 8, but always increase it by 10 watts. Right. So, and then I would like the athlete to finish knowing, okay, I probably could have done one more, because then the whole, injuries and overtraining, you kind of, err on the side of just less than too much.
So
That
RPE
consistency then
nine,
that continues.
RPE nine is
Not
the
every
game.
day. Yeah, well, yeah. Not nine every day.
Understood. Uh, what in the technology world are some of the things that you see on the horizon that you are looking forward to?
Oh man. Well, right now we're very deep in TrainingPeaks virtual. There's a lot of cool stuff that can happen there. We're getting a lot of great feedback from coaches in terms of how can we make that better technology wise. This virtual, the concept of training indoors in a virtual world has amazing potential beyond just looking at it on your Apple TV, right? Eventually, augmented, like all of this type of stuff, but yet the goggles are too big and too sweaty, everything right now. But somehow that's going to be solved. So I think in terms of future of technology, it would be amazing to have that augmented kind of feel, or the surround, seeing within the virtual world 360, everything around you and being able to make that feel more real indoors. Like our physics engine within TrainingPeaks is amazing because you have to know the wind direction, like to position yourself in the group. And if you're going to go from a tailwind into a headwind, you don't want to be on the front of the group when you make that turn. You got to know where the headwind is. You see the turn coming up, and you're going to adjust yourself in the group to account for that. That's like you just don't go hard all the time. Like you actually have to think, right? Also, we have drifting. So if you come into a corner, a downhill turn, you don't just power through it because you'll swing out wide. Others will pass you on the inside because they will coast. Like this physics engine is really fun to think about and play with and to have it advance forward to feel more real. So I'm really excited about the whole kind of virtual world concept and bring it, who knows where it goes, but technology is definitely going to advance that experience.
That sounds very intriguing. What kind of setup do you need to be
Mm.
able to experience Training Peaks Virtual?
I mean, you need really what's known as a smart trainer. Basically, any new trainer now that has Bluetooth connection is a smart trainer, meaning it can take care of the resistance for you. So there's any number of apps you can use besides TrainingPeaks Virtual. But once you have a smart trainer and you choose a course, then as you hit a climb, it'll increase resistance. As you go downhill, it'll make it easier. My example of a draft and a wind, a headwind, you'll feel that within the rear wheel. And, these trainers today really simulate outdoor riding really well. They have a flywheel. So when you stop pedaling, it just doesn't like stop. You actually have some momentum behind you and you can feel that momentum and get back on it. So you need a smart trainer. And you need basically, a laptop or something with Bluetooth connection to connect TrainingPeaks Virtual to it to control the app.
So it's basically, is it like the trainers without the cassette? Is that what
Yeah,
you're referring to as well?
a lot of them are trainers with a cassette. So you take your rear wheel off, and then you just instead of a rear wheel, you put it on the trainer.
Yeah, but you don't shift gears anymore, right? It does it all
You,
for you.
I mean, most people today are shifting gears. Our app does have a virtual gear shifter on it as well.
Uh-huh.
So you don't have to use your derailleur. You can just tap the button and change gears through the TrainingPeaks virtual app, or you can change gears with your derailleur. So you can go either way.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, it's fun. I just did a race at noon today indoors because it's snowing here in Colorado, not in Mexico City.
Not in Mexico City, not today. But I heard that the weather here is kind of crazy, so we will see. We'll see. Um, where do you get the energy and motivation personally to keep going?
Oh, I feel like I'm 12 years old still. I fell in love with cycling and racing when I was 12. I fell in love with skiing later in life, so I'm still improving as a skier. Unfortunately, I'm getting slower as a cyclist, but I can compete in the 50 plus age group, podium. So that keeps me going. Getting on the podium no matter what is always, you feel like a 12-year-old. So that keeps me going. So definitely competition. I'm definitely into competition. So I probably race maybe 15 times a year. I'm always thinking about the next race. And then that bleeds into the motivation for today's training and hence working with a coach. So on the physical side of working out, again, it feels like a 12-year-old. That just is fun. And the motivation just on the business side of things is I feel like I've never had a job. I just do what I love doing. And so somehow it's worked out. So knock on wood, keep it going for a few more decades.
Same here, same here. I love it.
Yeah.
What would be the top 3 things that would say are your part of core routine to stay fit and healthy?
Oh, sleep. Try to drink less alcohol. I go through waves. Quality sleep. I'm really good about that. I'm a good sleeper. Definitely sound like nutrition fundamentals is good. There's obviously times where I can improve that, but I think if you have the fundamentals, it's okay to kind of cheat on the sides of it. And then building the I guess your habits, I mean, so much goes back to habits, whether it's sleeping, nutrition, but just habits of prioritizing the daily fitness. And I don't always get it in. And if I don't, that's okay. I can't dwell on it. But having that built in as a habit that I prioritize, the workout of the day.
Have you incorporated anything into your routine that made a very significant difference?
Oh man, I think planning is a lot of it in terms of looking at the calendar ahead of time and seeing where the obvious holes are in your calendar to add the workout. So that's made a big difference in terms of, or if the week is really filling up, kind of like putting those calendar meetings in there that aren't meetings and they're actually workouts. So yeah, you got to plan ahead.
I couldn't agree more. I have my workouts fully planned out, and worst case, I just try to move them to a new slot. But I always make sure that there's room for that because you don't want to slip unintentionally, at least. But I couldn't agree more that planning is a big part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You're here.
Yeah. Is there something that you are really looking forward to these days? Something that brings you joy in terms of sport, health and fitness?
Snow. We got 10 inches of snow last night in the mountains. I'm so happy.
It is coming.
Ski I know ski areas are starting to open. So it's just like, yeah, it's like Christmas for me. I can't wait to get out on snow. Again, I do a lot of touring, ski mountaineering, ski mill racing. So it's the same thing as cycling. It's the endurance endorphins of going uphill. You're basically running uphill with skis on. And then you lock in your boots and bindings and go crazy fast downhill like mountain biking. It's just in a different mode. So I love exploring. So I'm looking forward to exploring some new places. I made a trip for Austria to go in March and go to some huts and do some ski touring to some huts in Austria and Italy. So that type of stuff really motivates me. It's really, really fun stuff to look forward to.
Amazing. I hope that we have a good season ahead of us.
Yeah.
And I would love to thank you for joining me for the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was a fun talk. Thanks a lot.
And that has been it for the episode with Dirk. I hope you enjoyed it and will be very thankful for any comments or feedback. It always is very appreciated on our end when we hear back from people tuning in to the show. And I'll be looking forward to catching you next time.